Hey everybody, this is Ela, and this is our first real painting, a very simple painting that we are going to do, that I'm going to demonstrate for the beginning watercolor class. And you can see how simple my composition is. It's just a circle in the middle of two sections. This is a half sheet, by the way, of the paper that I recommend. The Arch is cold press. And this is a 9 by 12 inch pad here. So I just cut a sheet in half and here it is. So I set up this composition as simply as possible. In some classes I've made it a little bit fancier, but the idea is that we've got 1, 2, 3 sections, and we are building on the exercise where we paint different concentrations, different values of a single color. And you can see I've done this here on this paper, and I have some little testers that I've done over here. Whenever I work on a picture, I always have what I call a tester sheet where I can try out and see, does the color look the way I want? So I've mixed the color already here and I've tested it out and I can see what it looks like. And here's the palette that I'm using. This is the White Nights St. Petersburg set. And I'm using this dark brown right here. To do this exercise, I encourage you to choose a fairly dark color. You don't want to use yellow or a color that is just very light, because you want to have range in value. You want to be able to go very dark and then a color that's much lighter. So I'm just going to go ahead, and here you can see I've mixed my color. I've taken some of that paint and I've mixed it with water, and I've already tested it out, and I've made a fair amount of it. You don't want to run out of your color. That would be bad. And the reason why that would be bad is that when you are filling in a shape, like this big circle that I'm going to fill in, if you interrupt that process of filling it in and you have to mix more color, there's a chance that that shape will begin to dry out. And you're more likely to either get a back run, which is like when you get that weird cauliflower look, or you might, if it really dries out, if it's a hot, dry day, you can even get like a hard line where you filled in the first section and then mixed that second color and then filled in the second section. So if you want it to be all even and smooth, you need to mix enough color and test it out. Make sure, stir it around, make sure it's really on your brush. Have a little scrap piece. It could be back of another picture. You want to ideally use the same paper as you're going to do your picture on, and just go, okay, that's the color. I've got a nice medium brown here, and that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a medium concentration of paint to fill in this circle. I'm also going to save part of this paper. It's going to keep it white, and then the third part I'm going to make very deep dark brown, and I'll show you how that works. So this is a study in values. Watercolor, there's a lot of planning. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't have areas that are surprises or spontaneous, but because you can't make things pale again, you can't add white later, you know, not at least, it won't look the same. If you mix white with some paint, it's not going to look the same as if you had saved it. And kept the original paper white. So here we go. I'm going to fill in this circle, and I'm going to start on the left and move to the right because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you would start on the right and move to the left. And the main thing that beginners struggle with is they want to do an outline, or maybe they want to start in the middle and work their way out. And we're fighting the fact that the paint wants to dry. Once the paint dries, you're going to have back runs, you're going to have harsh lines. So it's more like we want to create a blob and have the blob get bigger and bigger. And I cannot get up and use the bathroom now. I can't stop and have a conversation. I have to just continually fill in this whole blob. And I want my brush to be really wet as I do this. You know, if I have lots of wetness, I can pull that wetness out. You can see how it's just this blob that's starting on the left and filling in. No areas are being left behind. I want this to just fill in quickly, and while the whole thing is still very wet. I don't want to do a lot of scrubbing once I've filled in an area. I leave it alone. If you go in and scrub it later, it's going to lose some of that freshness. So it's like as much as possible. I don't want to do much more than one pass. And if I go a little out of the lines, it's not the end of the world. But if I try and fix this the easiest way, if there's a little bit that's outside the line, and this is the only time when I use paper towel, unless I'm trying to do a special crazy effect. Press, 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 press. That worked. If I got too much paint in here, I don't use the paper towel. It's like using a sledgehammer to scratch your nose. It's too much. If I want to remove some of this paint, I use the paintbrush, and I rinse the paintbrush first. Then I dry it on a paper towel. I don't wipe a dirty brush on my paper towel, because then my paper towel is going to be dirty and I won't be able to use it as long. And then I can just gently touch, touch, touch the really wet parts, and it'll just soak up a little bit of that paint. And it'll just kind of fill itself in as it sits there. So, I don't know, I'm going to date myself Julia Child style. If you remember Julia Child, remember how she'd always have a second one ready so that, you know, they didn't have to do any editing? I don't like editing either. So I'm just going to keep going. Here we go. So that first one, this guy's going to dry. You can't just go in with your second color. You have to let this dry before you can put another color on there, or else you're going to have the two colors bleed into each other. And if that's what you want, great. But if you want to have a clear, sharp, different values, defined areas, then you have to let this dry. And sometimes it'll feel like it's dry and it's not, and it'll look weird. So what I like to do, the way I like to dry my pictures, is you let it just sit for a few minutes, 5 minutes. If it's a sunny day, you can put it outside. Just make sure it doesn't blow away. But just let it sit for a little while. And then the easiest, fastest way to speed up the process after it's had a chance to just settle and dry a little bit, I picked off a little bit of fleck there, is use a hairdryer. I'm a big fan of hair dryers. So on the lowest setting, so you don't blast the paint around, just hit it with a hair dryer. And if your picture is curling at all, it'll begin to flatten out. As your picture dries, it will become more flat. Your picture shouldn't be cold on the back anymore. It should be, you know, feeling kind of more kind of evenly the same temperature throughout. And just be patient. You know, if nothing else, that would be the time to use the bathroom, scratch your nose, talk to a friend, whatever. While it's drying, start another project, whatever you want to do. But you want to make sure it's totally and completely bone dry. This is also an interesting demonstration of how colors can change. There is maybe a little bit of black paint that got into this one as well, but colors do change as they dry. They become paler. Sometimes there's a shift in tone. So now I'm going to do the next layer. Now that this is totally dry, and I want this, I'm going to paint this section right here dark. And I'm tempted to make it a little bit more exciting. If I wanted to make this more exciting, I can put some circles down here. I'm creating an obstacle course for myself, just to really show you what's going on here. So this is not too difficult, but a little bit of an obstacle course. I need to fill in this whole area around these circles with a very dark brown, darker than this. And like I said, I want to make sure I have plenty of paint, and I want it to be very dark. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit more water in here. I can use a dropper, but I don't want to run out. And I'm going to go into this brown here. And I want to make sure, move this out of the way, make sure that I'm really putting a lot of paint. This is a monochromatic picture. We're keeping it really simple. If I put a bunch of water on my paint and leave it alone for several minutes, that'll also help it dissolve, so I can make a really deep dark color. Probably getting close to dark enough. But I want there to be a really clear difference between the color I'm going to lay down now and the last layer. So whenever you do watercolor painting, you always start from the lightest. So this is my lightest layer besides the white, and then you go darker and darker. So this is my darker layer. I'm going to test it out. This is the same color as what I just laid down. This is the next layer. Let's see, is it dark enough? It's a little bit darker. I'm going to add even more. Get it wet, rub it around. It might be a little bit on the creamy side. Dip my brush in water, go directly into the paint. Stir, stir, stir. Painting in watercolor requires a lot of patience. It can be very meditative, but you know, you have to breathe, relax. Don't get stressed out if you can help it. That's a little better. I think that's different enough. And this will also change and become a little bit lighter, but I think it'll be fine. Okay. I've got a lot of paint here. It's very concentrated. Once again, I'm not going to jump around. I'm not going to do any outlines. I'm going to start on this left area here. It's going to be a blob, and the blob is going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to have to dance around these spots. That's the tricky obstacle course. It's not very difficult, but here we go. So my brush is wet. It is full of paint. I have a concentrated color here that's a little bit deeper. Probably could have made my last this guy even a little bit more pale, but it'll be okay. And I don't want to overcompensate for the fact that, you know, you can't make this darker by making it wetter. If I do that, then I'm going to have back runs. It just doesn't work. So here I'm going around this circle. If I'm worried about this drying out, I have a bunch of paint on my brush and I'm going dot, 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 and I'm making this side really wet. Now I can go over here and work over on this side. This is pretty minor obstacle course, but still, the idea is I can wander off over here and this is not going to dry out. This is really important stuff to learn. This is how you can get a big, even wash. See how I'm spreading out here? This is still fine. No problem here. I'm constantly looking at how shiny, how wet my paint is. Now I'm going to connect it. There we go, connecting. When you fill in large areas like this, you don't want to use a tiny brush. I wouldn't want to use a brush smaller than this. This is, I think, an 8. This would be even better with a 10 or a 12. It's nice that it comes to a sharp point. I could do this with a flat brush, but I'm more used to using round brushes. So that's just my preferred style because it's what I'm used to using for everything. So I'm just filling and filling and filling and working fast. I'm not worried, not messing with this. Just keep filling it in, making sure that I have lots of paint on my brush. I have another obstacle course. Woo, I'm going around another circle here. I'm going to color in this part, which means that I need to make sure this lower part, once again, touch, touch, touch. Just touching the brush to that area will deposit paint and make it very wet so it won't dry out before I'm ready. And now I can go ahead and go around this upper part. There you go. It's like the world's easiest maze. Okay, now I can connect these two. If I want to move this around here, I can. Okay, I'm going to stand over here. This blob is continuing to move outward. You can see I'm going through my paint. All that paint that I made, I'm using it up. It's really good that I'm using a cold press paper. The texture of the paper also prevents this from drying faster than I want it to, and particularly Arches cold press. And other cotton, other cotton papers also do this well, but I trust Arches the most to do this consistently. It doesn't dry out as fast, and I'm able to do these large areas and not get back runs. I did it. Make sure I caught everything. I went a little fast and missed a couple spots, but I'm going fast. Because I worked quickly, it's still wet. It's not a problem. Be careful about how far you jump around, though, because you can get an accidental. It just, messing around too much after the fact can cause problems. You think you're fixing it, and actually, because the area might be a little bit dry and your brush is wet, you're actually going to make the problem worse. You're adding too much moisture to a dry area. Just for the fun of design, I drew some matching circles on the top. I just did that for fun. But generally, if you find that you don't love your pictures that you're making, it's probably, the number one problem that I find that beginners struggle with is making it really clear where are your dark colors, where are your medium colors, where are your light colors. If you have a bunch of colors, if you took a black and white photo of your picture that you don't like and everything looks gray, that means that you haven't worked out your values, right? It's really clear where my values are here. I've got light, I've got very dark, and I've got a medium color here. So that's the exercise. We've done a simple painting, a simple value study painting. Hope you enjoyed this. Please try this out. Try it with other colors. You can make it more complicated, but this is the most simple version that I was able to come up with. All right, take care.